So that money was printed and created, but it's not in circulation.
Yeah. So for that reason, we're not necessarily seeing the hyperinflation that some have predicted, right?
Right. And you see it. You do see inflation in different areas. I think one of the biggest misconceptions about inflation is that it lifts all prices proportionally, and it doesn't. It gets has to work its way through the economy, and it depends on where your starting point is. Like, for instance, GM stock should be zero, but I can't remember what it traded at its IPO, but it's the market value of that stock is significantly higher than zero. So that's an indication of inflation right there, at least in an asset price. And then you see it in gold, and the metals, gold, silver, platinum, copper, and then you're seeing it in agricultural commodities. And my wife always complains that she sees it in grocery store prices. Not that I make her do all the shopping, but she's the most observant of that. So it's the biggest fear right now is that as the economy starts to recover, the banks are going to start to say, hey, I've got a better investment opportunity out there than getting 1%, leaving it in my vault. I'm going to start loaning it out into the economy. And then you start exciting the economy, stimulating the economy, and that'll sound really good at the beginning. Everybody will be getting jobs, salaries will be going up, salesmen will be happy because they're making all their quotas, and then it'll all of a sudden it'll be 12% inflation for that first year, and then the Fed will have to do something. They'll say, oh my gosh, we have to control inflation. What do we do? And they'll come around and they'll say, okay, we gotta raise interest rates. And the second they raise interest rates, they'll crash the economy, and it'll go right back to where it was before. So that's my guess anyway. So they're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. They're hoping for to grow out of this slowly and predictably, but I think it's just going to accelerate wildly and get out of control pretty quick.
Yeah, interesting. Well, and yeah, it is going to be interesting to see what shakes out with all this, because I know states are having trouble, as far as the budget is concerned. So I can't imagine that we're going to be seeing state governments hiring much or doing those kind of make-work projects. So it would probably have to come from higher up at the federal level, I guess, right?
Yeah, I imagine so. They'll give grants out. That's basically what the stimulus projects are. You see, bridges to nowhere and rocket ships to Mars or whatever. Eiffel Towers constructed of macaroni noodles. Whatever it is, whatever they think is going to generate or get money into the economy. But that's all based on a goofy economic idea known as Keynesianism, which is that the whole economy is just a circle where people spend money, and then that leads to companies making more money, so then they expand their businesses and they hire more people and pay bigger salaries, so that gives them more income, so they spend more, and you go round and round and round. And anybody who understands classical or neoclassical economics or free market economics will instantaneously recognize that loop that they've created as a perpetual motion machine. It's not really how economics works. Yeah.
Well, bringing this back down to where we live, this is where your novel Indivisible comes in. Am I right about that? In trying to relate what might happen to certain individuals or how things could work out?
It starts actually in Japan, and Japan has to sell a large portion of their U.S. treasuries or our debt that they own. They had to sell it in order to meet a liquidity crisis, and that triggers China and the rest of the holders of our debt to sell off, and which in turn, and when you sell bonds in mass, that drives up the interest rates. So high interest rates will bankrupt our government. So the Federal Reserve has to step in and buy those treasuries, and they do that by printing money. Well, you can only do that so long before people figure out that you basically have a banana republic, and people lose confidence in the money, and the dollar crashes. And so it sets off. They have to shutter the banks because people are making withdrawals. There's bank runs and bank panic happening. Shuttering the banks actually exacerbates the problem because it causes people to lose confidence in the systems and institutions and the currency. And that's really what hyperinflation is about. It's not that we quadruple the money supply so we have quadruple the prices. It's the government quadruples the money supply and we have 100 times the prices because people say there's no end to it. They're doubling. So I want to spend my money now. It's before it loses its value. I want to spend it as fast as I can. And you get what economists call a crack-up boom. And that's what happens in the book. And I probably could have ended it right there, but I took it one step further. I said, okay, so what? What happens then?
Yeah.
And what you have is government, again, with its pathological and pervasive need to do something, says we're going to punish these price gougers and these people who keep hiking prices by passing a bunch of laws that says you can only charge this much for that and this much for that. And well, what that instantaneously does is it bankrupts all the store owners and all the merchants because they have to sell below cost. So they all go out of business, and then you get shortages. And then shortages, when you can't find diapers and baby formula and gasoline for your car to go to work, you get to the point where people have nothing left to lose. So they start to protest, and then protests lead to riots. Well, the government, again, always wanting to maintain control, brings the military home from overseas to enforce martial law and all these new executive orders and edicts. I think I have probably 20 different executive orders in the novel. And it just becomes a downward spiral of more tyranny and more totalitarianism, and the tighter the government squeezes, the more the population resists, and you end up at a point where people in the military, the Oath Keeper crowd, they leave. And so the military loses its operational effectiveness, and you essentially have chaos in America.
I wanted to ask you. You mentioned the soldiers. The one, there's a couple of soldiers mentioned in particular, and one we see more of. These soldiers are quite a study in contrast as to their own attitude toward the military and toward the American people and so on.
So that's basically the two soldiers in the book. There's Jimmy Marzan and Michael Rollins. And Marzan is morally tormented he's conflicted between his sense of duty to his unit, asking him to do things that exceed kind of the boundaries of his principles and his moral philosophy. And he's tormented between those 2 points, walking the razor wire throughout the better part of the book, trying to decide how to react or how to deal with situation to situation. Michael Rollins, on the other hand, he's a professional mercenary. He enjoys soldiering. He enjoys the rush from it. There's a part in there about Michael Rollins describing it, the feeling as if he were a rock star on tour when he goes through these villages and hovel to hovel in a country like fictionally titled Talibanistan. And will do whatever he's asked to do, will not question it, and will never ponder the consequences of it. And then as they are brought back to the United States to do the same things in the United States that they're doing in Fallujah or whatever, Rollins stays on that path, whereas Jimmy Marzan is forced to deal with it.
Now, you dedicated your book to the Oath Keepers. Who are they, and why did you dedicate it to them?
I think that is a spectacular organization. Their principles are that they essentially write up a document that is given to whoever asked for it, obviously, is given to people in the military and police, and where they agree, they take an oath to uphold their oath, which is their oath is to defend the Constitution of the United States. So they sign their name to this document that says, if I'm ever asked to perform warrantless searches or incarcerate Americans without a warrant, or to do things that exceed the limits of what they're allowed to do under the Constitution, that they're not going to do it. That they're going to refuse. And it's portrayed by the leftist state-run media as a rebellious organization, but they're not rebellious at all. They're just reasserting and reaffirming their oath to uphold the Constitution. And I think it's a terrific, terrific organization, and that's why I dedicated the book to them.
Okay. So as I look at this, I'm thinking if we have some sort of anarchy, if not nationwide, at least in certain pockets or whatever, we're not necessarily going to see the military or police officers all on the quote-unquote other side, right?
I think when police are brought home and soldiers are brought home into their communities and asked if, God forbid, it ever got to such a situation where they're asked to kick in doors and haul people off in the dead of night and drive tanks down, Beaver Cleaver neighborhoods, that they would say, wow, this is way beyond what I signed up for. I'm out of here. This is ridiculous. And I think a very, very significant portion of them would do that in such a situation.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, God forbid that we have that kind of thing happen, but, at the same time, again, it's one of those things that I think we can't rule it out.
One need only look no further than the experience of the Soviet Union. I mean, here's the second most powerful country in the world, the biggest country in the world with 15,000 nuclear warheads, a military with the capability to overrun all of Western Europe in a matter of days, probably, and they went from that to gone in 18 months.
Mm-hmm.
In 18 months.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of the gentleman's name. I cannot bring his name to mind. But who has written a book about how the U.S. is heading down a track that parallels the Soviet Union, and he said that back in 1989, if you'd have asked somebody if they thought the Soviet Union was going to collapse or break up or whatever, everybody would have laughed. It's going to be difficult.
And everybody's got their hands in the till, so to speak, from people receiving benefits directly from the government to the banks, to the big corporations. They're all on the IV line, so to speak, from the government. And so there's an incredible amount of political pressure to keep the status quo. And when you have $14 trillion of debt, as much debt as your entire economy produces in value over the course of a year, and trillion-dollar deficits as far as the eye can see, all the way out into the future, you pretty quickly come to the conclusion that it's unsustainable.